Greetings, campers, and welcome to my campfire. This is episode 23. Please gather round, get yourself comfy and cozy, grab your favorite drink, and actually gather a bit closer, because this episode is going to be a scary one. But don't worry, campers, I am here and I will guide you through these tales. As always, before I start my tales, I want to make sure you all know that the green is always a safe place for you, no matter who you are or where you come from. It doesn't matter your nationality, your religion, or spiritual preference. Those are of no concern to the green. All the green asks is that you are respectful. There is no need to worry about the latest fashion trends or the stresses that society tries to put on you. Here, in the green, you are free to just exist. It reminds me of a woman named Denise Prudhomme. She worked for Wells Fargo. Denise was 60 years old. She didn't keep in much contact with family and had very few friends. She clocked in at 7 a.m. Friday, August 16th, 2024. There she sat until 4 days later, when a complaint about her smelling caused someone to tap on her shoulder. A call was quickly placed to EMS, where it was discovered she had died. No one noticed or said a word to her while her body sat there at a desk in a cubicle for 4 days. So please, camper, take care of yourself. Check in with whomever you value as a family member or a friend. And don't be afraid to put your mental health, your physical health, and your emotional health first. Because if you don't, no one else will. And with that being said, please get out to the green. Let your feet touch the grass or sand or leaves and just ground yourself. Take in some deep breaths and let out that stress that's holding your shoulders down, that's dragging you down mentally and emotionally. You are always welcome here in the green. To get this campfire started, I think maybe what we should do is discuss some of the quote-unquote most haunted national parks. Now, a quick Google search will send us to Mammoth Cave National Park of Kentucky, which is hard to believe because Mammoth Cave is huge. It is full of underground tunnels covering over 400 miles. This national park has over 200 documented paranormal encounters spanning over 100 years, if not more. I suppose we could start with the most popular of haunting stories, which would be Dr. Krogan and his consumption colony. Dr. Krogan believed that bringing sick patients with what was called consumption back in his day. Nowadays, we term it tuberculosis. But this doctor believed that bringing these patients from the hospitals into these underground caves would benefit the patient because it was a constant temperature of about 54 degrees. The doctor created 11 huts and moved 15 of his patients into these consumptive cabins. These caves can actually still be seen when visiting. Unfortunately, out of the 15 patients, 2 patients died within the first year. The rest of the patients progressively got worse. And even the good-intentioned Dr. Krogan died from tuberculosis in 1849. If you are a paranormal fan that likes to go and make contact with a ghost or two, but don't know where to stay, then you are in luck. There are many camping options to be had in Mammoth Cave National Park. Mammoth Cave has 3 main campgrounds that actually offer laundry services, showers, and additional camping supplies. There are 13 campsites that are riverside, which sounds really appealing to me. And these spots require a more rugged hike, though, to get out there. So if you have a handicap or you plan to take maybe a lot of heavy equipment, you will want to scope out your options. So you can either hike to these riverside spots yourself, or you can paddle up along the river to your campsite, or arrive at these rustic camp spots via horseback, which really sounds kind of appealing to me. But if you are more of the glamper type, then the 3 main campgrounds would probably be more your jam. Those ones are also close to the visitor center, and you can get to the cave tours a lot quicker. Now, this is a national park, and camping options do differ, so please check their website for your best camping experience possible. Make sure the camping style that you want is available during that particular season. And whatever camping option you do choose, please know you will need a permit, whether it is in a camper setup, tent, or otherwise. And be safe. Trust your instincts. If someone or something is nagging at your mind and you get that stomach flip-flop feeling, don't ignore it. Find a fellow camper for help, contact the visitor center, call a friend or family, or just leave that area. And also keep in mind that depending where you are camping, you may not have cell service or, internet access. But don't ignore that feeling. Okay. One of the tours you can take is called the Violet City Tour. On this tour, the park rangers will take you into the cave, turn the lights off, and let you get a real feel for what it was like to be in the caves before electricity was brought in. The park rangers refer to this as the Blackout Tour, where the tour is literally guided by lantern. Many of the rangers, as well as the tour goers, report the feelings of presence, of some sort of presence. Something or someone is bumping into them or pushing them aside. They also report hearing the running of footsteps coming right at you. But when you turn, when you flash your light or your lantern, there's nobody there. When you get close to these consumption tour or cabins that I had mentioned earlier, keep in mind they're still set up. So you can actually walk inside these consumptive cabins. And a number of tour goers will report that they hear these ghostly coughs of the long gone patients. Now, the skeptics will call out and say that, maybe it's somebody else coughing around the corner. And, because you're in a cave, it echoes. That coughing sound is going to echo. And that's a safe assumption, but it's not a proven assumption. So maybe, but maybe not. Now, this hike, the Violet City Lantern Tour, it's a long one, okay? It's 3 hours and it's a 3-mile hike. So if you are claustrophobic, have a disability, or are afraid of the dark and maybe underground spaces, or if maybe you have a stroller and young children who really may not enjoy being in that type of setting, you may want to choose a different tour. Of course, always ask questions at the visitor center for other hikes that you can take part in. Again, it's very seasonal, so plan your trip ahead. Now, back in 2021, a camper had reported on the Kentucky Haunted Houses webpage that while they were visiting at the Sunset Terrace Hotel, yep, there's hotels there too, this family spotted a creepy little girl outside their window. This family had a small son, okay? And he was terrified. He told his parents that there was a dark image moving around their room at night. And the next morning, when they arose, there was a skinny, almost bony handprint on their bathroom mirror like somebody had pressed their hand up there while they were, showering, causing all that steam on the window. This handprint did not match anybody's handprint that stayed in that cabin or in that hotel. Apparently, it scared that little boy so much that he didn't even want to talk about the place when they got home. And it isn't just the visitors who report the strange outings. Don't forget, we have a lot of tour guides, and these guides also report the same things. Being bumped and knocked into, swearing they heard somebody, maybe like a lagging tour goer. And when they go back, there is no one there. We have one tour guide, a Larry Purcell, who saw a black family at the back of one of his tour groups. Now, he was giving a tour, giving a speech, and they were listening just like any of the other tour goers. But because they were so far back, he was a little concerned that they might get lost or kind of lose their way. Now, when he turned the electricity back on, the entire family was gone. So he went back, he looked, he didn't see anybody. Nobody was around the corner, nobody lost. It's like they were there and then they were gone. Now, this particular spot in the cave where the tour guide Larry was giving his tour, it was once a Methodist church. And this church would hold services. It seems like they really tried to put everything they could into these caves. But at that time, back then, even if you were a member of the church, your skin color still dictated where you got to stand. And apparently, the black community still had to stand in the back. Was this coincidence? Was this a phantom family? No one really knows. The Mammoth Caves have been one of, quote unquote, those attractions since its discovery. The minute it was discovered, everybody wanted a piece of it. They wanted to explore it. They wanted to find out just how far it went. It was just such an experience that people, even from England, would come and visit this giant cave, this Mammoth Cave. It was such an inspiration to some. It was a huge travel destination for others, and it still is. Let's be honest. Miles and miles of underground caves. But what cannot be overlooked is the fact that it would not be the amazing and popular place if not for the slaves that made it so. Yes, Mammoth Cave was claimed by whoever had the money or whoever owned that portion of land. And because it was on their land, they claimed it. But it was the slaves who mapped out the trails, who knew where the safe places were and where the unsafe places were. So it was their knowledge and eventually their love of Mammoth Caves that made it such a success. And to honor and respect those who made it the cave system, didn't make it the cave system, but to honor those who made it what it is today, we have to give credit to one of the slaves named Stephen Bishop. Stephen was owned by Franklin Gorin. So Franklin Gorin purchased the caves in 1838. Excuse me. And then he sold that cave along with Stephen and another slave to Dr. John Grogan, the doctor who said, caves are going to cure consumption. During his time at the cave, Stephen would lead thousands upon thousands of tours. But he wasn't just a tour guide. He made the cave system what it is, in all honesty. He mapped all the caves. Well, he mapped almost all of the passages out. He knew where it was safe and he knew where it wasn't safe. He discovered many passages. He mapped all of these out and even named some of these discoveries. He named them himself. His knowledge of the cave system was on par. No one else knew the caves like he was. He was the expert, quote unquote. When cave goers arrived, they would specifically ask for Stephen to guide them. He was really special, and it was told, and many people could tell just how important Stephen took the caves. He loved the caves, regardless of, unfortunately, the status of him as a human being. He loved being in those caves. He was really special. And honor and celebration still is paid homage to him in stories and in poems. It's really important. He's really an important guy. Now, I would like to interject here by saying that although Stephen was a slave, and he was still in charge of the caves. Now, there are some people who are making speculations as to why he became such an experienced tour guide. Was it just because it was his job and he had no choice? Or was it his job, but he took great value in it? He valued his job. Some people believe that he would guide the tour goers on the safe passages because he didn't want to get in trouble if a tour goer got hurt. But he was a human being, and to me, I really think most human beings, they do care about one another. He wouldn't want somebody to get hurt in a place that he valued so much. Now, Stephen Bishop did die a free man in 1856, albeit of unknown causes, and he is buried in the Old Guide Cemetery. Some believe that Stephen and other slave guides still visit the cave on a more spiritual level. There is no rhyme or reason, but there are times when different tour goers and guides will just spot a person way off in the distance, alone and carrying a lantern. Now, I personally have done a number of cave exploring, and I believe the last cave I explored was the Seneca Caves. These are in Ohio. These caves have stalagmites and stalactites of massive proportions. However, Mammoth Cave does not have any of these, as it is it's just a dry cave. And yet it still is one of the most amazing caves you will ever see. And it has been used by many peoples for many years. There were even mummies found in the cave, and cave drawings or petroglyphs that are estimated at about 4,000 years old. There are remnants of old indigenous clothing, old and discarded torches, along with old moccasins. So it was definitely used as a shelter and home by many indigenous people. And I can't help see, I'm such a history buff that I can't help but imagine when I'm walking, I'm probably walking in the same footsteps of so many others, thousands and thousands of years ago. To me, it's kind of shocking to me. Now, June 7th, 1935, cave guides Lyman Cutliff and Grover Campbell were, they had a situation. They were quite experienced cave goers. Okay, so they had been there, and they thought they knew it all. However, they were trying to make a better trail, like a safer trail, through a couple of different passages. While they were scouting things out, they were only about 2 miles in, and they discovered a ledge that was like 20 feet above the floor. Now, this ledge had not been reviewed by anyone. Nobody knew about it. Still, there's still so many mysteries in Mammoth Cave. Now, it was located about 70 feet from Waldeck Dome. Charles Waldeck was a Belgian immigrant who immigrated to Cincinnati, Ohio, and opened up shop as a photographer, and is the first person to ever photograph the inside of Mammoth Cave. And most say he is the first to photograph the inside of any cave in the world. It's possible. It was 1866 when Charles made the trip south to Kentucky. So what's the big deal? So he was the first person to take a photograph. Like, okay, whoop-de-doo. Well, camper, because in all accounts, Mr. Waldeck was carrying around a bomb. Back then, cameras needed a flash in order to take their picture, and that was done with a chemical called magnesium. But too much magnesium, and you might blow, half your face off. So how much would be needed just to take a picture in the dark inside a cave? It was risky. And luckily, Mr. Waldeck was also a chemist before he turned to photography, so he had the knowledge and knew just how much to add without, hurting himself or anybody else. The photo is actually really impressive for back then, for, using chemicals and things to take pictures. It's quite impressive. So impressive that area was then named after Charles Waldeck. But back to Lyman and Grover, back to the tour guides. They ended up ascending the wall and were crawling around the ground, making notes of their findings, things they saw. When all of a sudden, moving their lantern, because no electricity was in there, they moved their lantern and discovered a head. As the light from the lantern took over the darkness, they found a partially buried miner. Early on, it was thought, and the body had been mummified. Early on, it was thought that the mummified miner was 500 years old. Thanks to carbon dating, it shows that this man lived 2,400 years ago, 2,400 years ago. This man was about 5'3". He wore a shell necklace. Around him were polished mussel shells, a woven bag, and it is believed that he had been down there collecting gypsum. Unfortunately, while digging, he possibly dislodged the boulder that had fallen on top of him. The boulder, it crushed him, but the men there were able to lift the boulder off of him. This man was later dubbed Lost John. Lost John was carefully lifted up and out of the cave and put on tour, and this is something I'm not a huge fan about. Some things were done back then. I don't condone it, and I can't change the past, but what we can do is learn from it. It is obvious that this Lost John, this man was an indigenous man. So in 1976, a federal law was passed prohibiting the display of indigenous remains, bodies, body parts, tools, burial mementos, and objects that really weren't for people just to come along and take had to be returned. And this included the body of Lost John. He was actually later buried near where he was found. Other mummified bodies were found, and I debate on sharing them because of the abuse and the mistreatment of the remains, but then again, how are we going to learn if we don't remember our past? So there were a number of mummified bodies that were laid to rest throughout the cave. And the Native American Graves Protection and Reparation Act, or NAGPRA, is a federal law. It was passed in 1990, so really not that long ago. This group works to return these human remains, sacred objects, and anything that is not meant to be taken just because you find it. The NAGPRA works to return those remains to the tribes they belong to. And I will provide a link to their page if anyone is interested in their work or maybe knows of something, some object that should be returned to the people. The caves I personally have explored almost always recommend you not to touch the stalactites and the stalactites and stalagmites because the oils in our skin can alter and deteriorate the natural stalactite and stalagmite creations. They're really very fragile. But at Mammoth Cave, it was encouraged to touch the cave. There is smoke that covers a number of areas of the caves, and people were encouraged to write their name. One of the oldest names found there is Wade Wallace, dated 1868, and even our good friend Stephen Bishop's son signed his name there as well. Phantom whispers, echoing footsteps can still be heard, and there are reports of coughs being heard in and around the consumption cabins. Ghostly faces are found around corners. Could be coughs from another tour goer, I will admit. You never know. Maybe echoing, like I said earlier, from around the corner. Sound travels. Sound does travel. And sound can travel a long, long time. William Floyd Collins. William actually went by Floyd, and he was an avid cave explorer even from a young age. Little Floyd would spend many days exploring the cave systems at Mammoth Cave. When Floyd became an adult in the early 1900s, he wanted to get involved in the tourism side of cave exploring. At that time, cave attractions were a good moneymaker, and he went into a deal with Beasley Doyle. Beasley Doyle owned Sand Cave. Now, Floyd wanted to get in on Sand Cave because, Floyd actually did own a cave. He owned Crystal Cave. However, location. It's commonly known that in a business, location is important. And unfortunately, Crystal Cave was one, not very easy to get to, and two, was literally at the end of all the more easily accessible caves. So there wasn't a lot of foot traction there for Crystal Cave. Once Floyd and Beasley went into business, Floyd decided he would go in and explore Sand Cave, root out the good paths and, see what needs to be done so he can start offering tours. Floyd went in to Sand Cave January 30th, 1925, with only one single kerosene lantern. Sand Cave was actually not an easy cave to traverse. And speaking from personal experience, when you're down in a cave, I think the farthest down a cave I have been is about 150 feet. The last thing you want to do is get stuck. I do have some claustrophobia. Yeah, that's how you say it. But for me, as long as I can stretch my arms out, I'm okay. But it's when I can't move my arms that I start to get the sweats and get a little nervous. But that is where Floyd soon found himself. He was inchworming his way through very tight spaces, sometimes wriggling on his stomach just to get through. And just when the cave began to open up Floyd's lantern began flickering. Now, worried that the lantern, might go out while he was in unfamiliar territory, he turned around to head back out. So he got back on his stomach and started wriggling back through those tight spaces. So he's inching his way back when, he's pushing with his feet to get him through. His foot pushed up against a 27-pound boulder, and he pushed it at just the right spot, dislodging it. It dropped right on top of his ankle and pinned him in such a way that he was stuck. He couldn't get his foot out. For the next 17 days, many people tried to free Floyd. They tried to dig a shaft going directly down towards him. Couldn't get through the rock. They tried to lift the boulder off of him. It's too heavy, too awkward of a position to get any sort of, rigging system to lever it up. Some of them even just stood there arguing over what to do next because every attempt was failing. Specialists were called in, engineers, geologists, cave experts at the time, all offering their assistance, but it was to no avail. And the weather didn't help either. Remember, this is January, albeit in Kentucky, but you still get some rough weather. There was rain, there was cold nights, and even additional cave collapses occurring around Floyd while people were trying to free him. Now, news of Floyd's predicament soon spread, and news reporters began appearing. A reporter by the name of William Burker Miller, who went by Skeets due to his size, he even risked his own life to get down to Floyd for an interview. He even earned himself a Pulitzer Prize for his efforts. All of this, of course, attracted all the looky-loos who wanted to come and see the trapped man of Sand Cave. It really did become quite the hotspot. Just not the way Floyd was hoping it would. However, Floyd continued to stay stuck down in the depths of Sand Cave. On that 18th day, a group of explorers were able to reach Floyd, but it was too late. They were only able to pronounce him dead due to exposure. And it would be months later when they could actually remove his body to give him a proper burial. Floyd was put to rest at the Mammoth Cave Baptist Church Cemetery. It was a tragic way for Floyd to pass, but with his passing brought attention to the dangers of haphazardly cave exploring. And it also brought attention to the importance of Mammoth Cave itself, which led to Mammoth Cave becoming a national park in 1941. Floyd Collins would not be forgotten, though. His story inspired a number of books, one called Trapped by Robert K. Murray and Roger W. Brucker. The Life and Death of Floyd Collins, written by Floyd's own brother, Homer Collins, and with the assistance of John L. Learberger. There was also a movie called Ace in the Hole, produced in 1951, based off of Floyd. The caves are deep and vast, camper, and some still feel they can hear the calls for help. Not just from Floyd, but also other trapped cave explorers. I had mentioned that a number of mummies were found in and around Mammoth Cave. These were placed there, some lovingly, with reverence by their families. The Fawn Hoof mummy was discovered. She was a young woman when she passed. She was buried in a sitting position with rocks around her, almost like it was like a little sitting area. That's what it looked like to me. She was adorned with deer skins and a woven wool blanket. but oddly with makeup, which isn't very known or wasn't really done back then. What was even odder is that she was 6 feet tall, which is practically impossible for the time period that she lived. Not to mention, she was purposefully embalmed. It wasn't just that she passed away and her body was placed in there and then the temperatures and the conditions of the cave mummified her. She was embalmed, as the Egyptians had done thousands of years ago. So the way the Egyptians mummified people, this is how she was found in Kentucky, in America. It's quite odd. Because of these findings, some people believed she was a Nephilim. Now, for those who are not familiar with the term, a Nephilim is considered a crossbreed between a fallen Christian angel and a human woman. So the Nephilim were their offspring, half human, half angel. The angels fell in love with women. They wanted to be with women. So they forego heaven, came down, did the deed with the women, and any children that were born had this half angel, half human, that's what they were, species. They were believed to have superhuman strength, were extremely tall, and unfortunately, no one can really examine the fawn hoof mummy. She was eventually given to the Smithsonian Museum sometime in the 18th century. But some people believe she disappeared, while others say that the people at the Smithsonian Museum kind of tore her apart and stuck her in a box, and she's sitting somewhere on a shelf. There are, depending on what website you look at, you're going to find different speculations as to where she is. Now, I feel she should be placed back where she was found, but who am I? Still, it's interesting that this particular mummy has pretty much disappeared. Her whereabouts cannot be confirmed. So, wow, Mammoth Cave is huge. This campfire is going on pretty long, so I'm actually going to stop it here. And on my next campfire podcast, we'll touch base a little bit more on the history and the mystery of Mammoth Cave. Its secrets are just beyond counting. There's just so many. But what we can still go see is the beauty that Mammoth Cave has to offer. To get the chance to walk in the same footsteps of so many people and to experience just the natural awe. I personally, I can't wait to get there myself. It would be an amazing experience that I also hope you get the chance to experience, camper. It is, like I said, it's on my bucket list, and I would love to hear your stories of Mammoth Cave, ghostly or otherwise. Please feel free to send me your experiences. You can send them to me via email at campfireghoststories8@gmail.com. That's campfireghoststories8@gmail.com. I hope to see you out in the green, and I will see you at the next campfire. Happy camping.